I want you to hang out with the right people and to be really careful with who you listen to when it comes to Autism Awareness Day, Autism Awareness Month, because there's a tendency, there's a narrative, and there are some lies and some suppressed truth that can actually damage your child's future. So you need to know what you need to be aware of and how this truth is being suppressed, because children are growing up with symptoms they didn't need if you knew about the underlying messages behind these symptoms. I'm talking anxiety, OCD, hyperactivity, stimming, eloping, flapping, rigidity, nonverbal autism. I'm talking about the things that really decrease life expectancy. We know that these children have a high in the statistics for imprisonment, ending up in institutions, criminal behavior, mental health, physical health issues. And that is because we are so busy with the autism acceptance and autism pride movement that we have forgotten the autism awareness part that has to do with understanding the biochemical imbalances that causes the symptoms that can be adjusted and change the outcome for your child so that your child gets a better life. And there's a huge movement against this that you need to be really careful not to get sucked into, because there's a spiritual warfare going on. There's a spiritual war against our children as well. And I want to talk to you about that in this video so that your child can get to the best possible outcome, more independence, better life quality, better social skills, and less of those symptoms that really make life hard. So I have previously made videos about this, the autism matrix, how this pride and acceptance movement has led to gender confusion as well. And I'll link to the videos here so that you can watch them, and at the end of this video as well. So let's dive into this and let's make sure that you don't end up in this trap, because awareness is many things, but you need to have the right type of awareness. So I'm going to share that with you. Let's get started. We just entered into Autism Acceptance, Autism Awareness Month, and I'm going to say something that's going to trigger some people. And I'm going to say it because I wish somebody had told me immediately that that whole thing, that whole movement can destroy a child with that symptom, with that diagnosis, can destroy the future of the child, the possible independence of that child, the quality of life for a child with autism. So I wish somebody had had the guts to tell you what I'm going to tell you today about autism acceptance and how it can either destroy the future of our children and increase this epidemic, or the opposite, enhance the quality of life, support the child in becoming as independent as possible in the future, and making sure that we build on the strengths and not reinforce the challenges of that diagnosis of the symptoms. And I can say this because my child was diagnosed when he was 4, and he lost his symptoms between 2004 and 2008. So if I had celebrated Autism Awareness and Autism Acceptance months the way that most moms do and want you to, that wouldn't have happened. So let's dive into what to do, what we need to focus on, as well as acceptance and awareness, and how acceptance can actually be a dangerous thing. Let's talk about it. So before we dive into how awareness can actually change the trajectory and the outcome for your child, if you are someone who is turnaround focused, you want to turn these symptoms around, you want to help your child overcome stimming and sleepless nights and screaming and tantrums and flapping and language and communication difficulties, social difficulties, lack of social skills. You want to help your child overcome those things so that the child can have as normal of an existence and as an independent life as possible. If you're someone who wants that, we need to look at how did this even begin? So this whole autism awareness movement, it started around 2007, and it actually started with a bunch of parents and experts, and in general it was experts who had doctors, pediatricians, neurologists, who had a child on the spectrum, and they wanted to help that child get to a better place. And a lot of parents looking for ways to deal with these symptoms, to help the child overcome these symptoms. And just as so many other things have changed, not necessarily for the better, this whole movement has changed from being focused on finding solutions to deal with symptoms and get rid of symptoms to acceptance, where the overall topic and the overall philosophy is that we need to accept these children as they are, that if we want to change any symptom, it is neglect, it's bad parenting, it is abusive, it should be banned, and we've got to wear our diagnoses with pride. I want to talk about the spiritual danger in this, but also the biological danger in this and the physiological dangers in this. Because my claim here is most people do not want to know the truth about autism. They want to be aware of autism, and awareness without action is actually useless. And if we don't follow up with action when we have a realization, when we have an awareness of anything, if we don't follow up with action and change, that awareness just becomes an idol. And as someone who came to Christ 3 years ago, as someone who wants to make sure that we include God's purpose for us in this, and we include God's word, I think that's quite dangerous, and I'll talk to you about that. But before we talk about that, I want to tell you that there was a study done on 6,000 children, a non-profit study in the Walsh Institute, under the Walsh Institute, of children with classical autism, that classical Kanner autism. And 95 to 98% of those children were all undermethylated. Meaning, if you are talking about autism awareness without addressing just one of the many underlying biochemical imbalances that lead to problems with neurotransmitters, aka mood and behavior and aggression and tantrums, and lack of ability to connect, lack of health, poor health in every shape or form. If you find this whole thing confusing about understanding a symptom and knowing exactly what works and what doesn't work for your child, and you've tried all the things and you haven't had any long-term results, and you're just longing for more clarity on what works for your child from moment to moment, because those things will change over time, and they change all the time, and they're actually very individual, meaning what works for your child will make another child worse, have more symptoms. So it's really important to know about these things. And if you don't know about these things and what to do, and what I did and what the moms that I've helped over time did, I'm happy to talk to you about your situation. But I need you to do one thing, and that's a sign, proof to me that you are willing and able and ready to do this type of work, because it's big. It's not easy. It's simple, but it's not easy. You need to send me an email at contact@barefootautismwarriors, like warrior, like the ones that go out in the field and combat other soldiers, contact@barefootautismwarriors.com. Send me an email and write audit in the subject line, and tell me a little bit about your situation and why you need help. And then I will answer your email, and I will talk to you about what the game plan might be for you And if I even think that I'm the right person to help you, and if I'm not, I'll find someone who can. Now back to the podcast. So undermethylation is an impairment of the process where neurotransmitters are activated and deactivated, enzymes and hormones and DNA expression is either balanced or unbalanced. So you have to have a balanced methylation. If you're undermethylated, these mechanisms will not work. And as I said before, 98% of children with autism have this issue. This issue can be addressed nutritionally with nutrients. So you can balance the methylation with nutrients like B6 and zinc. And if we don't shed light on just that tiny piece of the puzzle, awareness is worth absolutely nothing. Because if we are just saying, hey, we got to be inclusive, we got to be accepting of these children who have tantrums, they're hand flapping, they're aggressive, they're running away, they're eloping, they're hyperactive, they cannot focus, they're in danger. And we know from the statistics that these are the children that are high in the statistics for suicidal behavior, for anxiety, depression, mental health issues, criminal behavior, institutionalization, imprisonment, and having to be monitored and supervised throughout life. I'm not talking about high functioning autism here. I'm talking about the children that were like my child was in childhood, where you couldn't talk, couldn't communicate with them. They would be in danger to themselves if they weren't constantly monitored, and aggression and tantrums and screaming and flapping and lack of social skills and behavior, it consumed the whole family. That's that type of autism I'm talking about. And so if we're not following up with knowledge and interventions that address the underlying messages behind these symptoms, I would say that acceptance is what is abusive. Acceptance and not wanting to face the truth of autism and make the changes necessary in order to give that child a better quality of life, that's the neglect. That is where I would say, if that was me, that's bad parenting, because it is like having a child with diabetes and refusing to deal with the diet and the biomedical side of things, and just saying, hey, I'm someone who's into diabetic inclusion. I'm someone who's into acceptance of diabetes or even cancer. You know that there are alternative ways to deal with cancer through lifestyle changes, diet changes, repurposing of less dangerous drugs even. I practiced that, and that was how I dealt with my breast cancer and overcame it back then. So this is more than just a day of talking a bunch of talk about autism, raising the flag for autism, and just wait until I get into the details of the biochemical issues behind autism symptoms and the spiritual warfare going on that is really, really attacking autism families and autistic children. In this video, I'm going to focus on the biochemical and spiritual reasons why you need to understand what's going on with autism, and that your awareness has to be focused on addressing the underlying messages behind autism symptoms, because your child cannot tell you that the reason why your child has a tantrum or is screaming or stays awake all night is because of anxiety that's caused by copper toxicity or undermethylation or pyrrole disorder. And if we're just saying, hey, the world needs to accept my child screaming, tantrums, flapping, OCD, hyperactivity, we are actually not helping our children. And it's like having a child that is not able to move, not able to speak about what's actually going on, fully dependent on, 100% dependent on you figuring that out and helping that child escape the prison of the symptoms that the child doesn't know how to escape. But it can be addressed. And the key to escaping that prison is often within nutritional approaches, but it's not enough. It just has to be addressed. So those are one of the pieces of the puzzle that we used to turn my son's autism symptoms around. Not all of the pieces, but it was one of the pieces. And in Autism Acceptance and Autism Awareness Month, we need to shout from the rooftops that the autism parenting magazines, the autism conferences, all the autism organizations, most of the autism Facebook groups are not comprehending this. They don't know this. And most of the experts out there have huge missing links and gaps in knowledge when it comes to not just testing for methylation and understanding whether a child is undermethylated or overmethylated, and that's a reason why the child has autism symptoms, like anxiety, depression, OCD, hyperactivity, aggression, picky eating, rigidity, or pyrrole disorder, or copper toxicity, and then addressing and adjusting that. So I only know of one or two, maybe a handful of practitioners that are up to date with all the knowledge that comes out. There are new findings, new clinical findings, and new things coming up about these underlying biochemical imbalances every single month. And it is not as easy as just giving some supplements and then everything will be fine. It's not as simple as taking a gene test and then giving some methylated vitamins that can actually make matters worse. So in the case of undermethylation, one of the things that William Walsh figured out in these studies of the 6,000 different individuals with autism was that giving someone who has a methylation problem, giving that person folate can actually make matters worse, because it might improve methylation, but the mood will get worse. So if you give someone methylfolate or folinic acid or folic acid, someone who's undermethylated, it actually lowers serotonin in that individual, the serotonin neurotransmission. And there's no way your child can tell you, I'm feeling so low, I'm feeling so desperate. So the child, who also often is nonverbal, will just be screaming and tantruming. And imagine being extremely depressed or extremely anxious and not knowing how to tell you, and you don't know, and you not knowing how to help your child with this, which is why it is my mission to educate moms to become experts in their child's tantrum triggers, in their child's bio-individual needs, because these needs change all the time. So we need to become experts in adjusting, understanding, and testing methylation, keeping the levels balanced. We need to understand that undermethylation is the case for all the children on the spectrum, under or over methylation, but most likely under methylation, which is something that can be addressed with nutritional approaches. But if you do it in the wrong way, you might exacerbate symptoms and turn symptoms worse, make symptoms worse, which is why it's not something you can just go to some random functional medicine practitioner or autism dietitian and get a test and get some supplements. And most of the moms who come to me to train to become their child's expert, train with these experts that I personally trust, which is only one or two worldwide. They have been to all the best biomedical practitioners. They have been in all the online conferences. They have been doing the tests. They have been doing all the supplements. And it hasn't helped long term. And that is because these children's needs, they change all the time. And you need to understand not only your child's tantrum triggers and bio-individual nutritional needs, which change all the time as well. So you can't just keep on giving the same foods. And this is also why the diets don't work, whether it's a GAPS diet, Nemetschek diet, vegan diets, paleo diets, specific carbohydrate diets. It will make some children worse, it makes some children better, and it changes. The results will change over time because we change as individuals. So you need to be able to look at your child, read the symptom, and adjust diet and lifestyle and nutrition according to the feedback that you're getting from your child. You can only do that if you learn how to become an expert in doing that for yourself in your own body. If you want to talk about that, send me an email at contact@barefootautismwarriors.com so that you can start understanding what your child's bio-individual needs are. We need to talk about that via email first. So, undermethylation is huge. Autism awareness needs to focus on understanding the biochemical imbalances. And pyrrole disorder is another thing that a lot of these children on the spectrum are dealing with. And pyrrole people, let's talk a little bit about them, and let's talk about a little bit about copper toxicity as well, and then what you can and cannot do to help your child finally get to a better place. So the people on the spectrum, which all the things I'm talking about, us parents, moms, we often suffer from the same things, underlying issues as well. And we need to address that in ourselves as well. So the pyrrole people, they get sunburned easily. They are night people. They are pale skinned, and they have a lot of mood swings. Copper toxicity or copper overload, which is something that is really common in these people. I'll list the percentage of these issues in the autistic population, but they tend to be hyperactive. They have depression, anxiety. As women, we have postnatal depression when that happens. It can even cause bipolar and schizophrenia. And this agitation, anxiety, aggression, which is also linked to something that we know as a glutamate to GABA imbalance, which is another thing that these children on the spectrum often deal with. And until we understand how to use supplements and diet to adjust this, and not just take a test and throw some supplements on it, but really individually tailor this to the specific child, the child will still have the underlying issues that cause the child to have a bad life. Because a life in anxiety, a life in aggression, a life in OCD, a life with eating disorders, a life with rigidity and anger and aggression, it is not an easy life, and we can romanticize it all we want. We can want inclusion. We can call for acceptance. All we want. But it is not going to give our children a good life and more independence. And I don't know any mom who doesn't want more independence for her child, who doesn't want her child to experience calmness relating to people and not be in this excited, agitated, aggressive state for such a big chunk of their life. And so that brings me to the spiritual part of autism awareness that we need to focus on if we want to help our children. And that's what I want. I don't want the world to include my child. I want me to be aware of my child's challenges, and I want to improve those challenges for my child so that my child can live a life in this world. But there's a really tricky spiritual aspect to this, and we'll get to that now. So we've talked about how autism awareness needs to be focused on the things that can actually increase the quality of life for our children in the future, the independence of the life for our children in the future. And now I want to wrap this up by including the spiritual aspect. What is God's plan for you and this child? And why is that important when it comes to Autism Acceptance Month, Autism Awareness Month? Well, I don't think it's coincidental that there was a shift from the initial movement, which was around awareness. Let's try to find ways to improve life for these children. Let's figure out how to address the symptoms and try to remove them. It's like triggers that the child is sitting on this stool of life. There are these nails sticking up with triggers that disturbs the child's peace and life and quality of life. These nails are sticking up. Some of them are epigenetic, some of them are nutritional, some of them are linked to methylation, some of them are environmental, some of them genetic, like I said. And our job is to remove the triggers that we can address, that we have influence on, to improve the comfort and the quality of life for the child. So it's not living a life on a chair full of nails. Spiritually, when we moved from awareness, trying to help these children overcome the symptoms, to this movement of acceptance, where the increasingly aging population of autistic children from that generation, which my child belongs to, he's born in 1999, and many of these children are now adults. And these adults pushed back towards that generation, wanting, just like there's a movement in society towards inclusion, acceptance, pride, identity, gender identity, and that is not necessarily increasing the quality of life or in coherence with God's plan for us. I do believe that God sent these children to us to prepare us and to bring us closer to God. So these children seems like they are His children put into our care. And they have this strange and mysterious and amazing way of flagging up and reacting towards and against the ways of the world. Artificial foods, which they react towards by expressing symptoms like aggression and eloping, and that is linked to the undermethylation, it's linked to the food intolerances, it's linked to the gut issues, it's linked to the copper toxicity that we were talking about before, because many of the foods that these children are eating, they are tantrum triggers because they are full of neuroexcitatories, they're full of copper, they are creating imbalances between GABA and glutamate. So they are making these children more aggressive, more prone to dangerous behavior and tantrums and screaming and aggression and anxiety. So they react towards the artificial world. They react towards indoor lifestyles, a life in front of screens that is actually not allowing the brain to develop the way that it should, and develop social skills, and develop the parts of the brain that codes for social skills, retention, visual processing, auditory processing, those things. So a passive indoor lifestyle, they're reacting towards that. Artificial demonic foods, they are acting towards that. They are protesting against that, not with words, but with symptoms. They are reacting towards the ways of the world. They are reacting towards a medicated world. They're reacting towards being born in hospitals and exposed to all kinds of artificial insults in the first years of their lives and processed foods. And so I really think it's important for you to think about this. What if this whole acceptance and pride movement, so the autism acceptance movement that was a movement against the awareness movement that was looking to take care of symptoms, now we are using the acceptance movement to include the symptoms, to be proud of the symptoms. The movement is called the Autism Pride Movement. We have t-shirts with Autism Pride written all over them. We're supposed to be proud as mothers rather than trying to deal with the root cause of the issues. And if we are not proud, we are labeled as bad parents. And so what if the pride movement is dangerous? What if it is the opposite of God's plan, which is to give us these children, to show us where in our lives we need to change our ways, our food, our lifestyle, nutrition, our walk through life in integrity and with God? What if the acceptance movement is the opposite, wanting us to be proud of status quo and staying in status quo, not wanting to change the children because that is the new normal, is that we're supposed to encourage stimming rather than understanding what are the biochemical reasons why this child is stimming. encourage the behavior and include the behavior, rather than trying to figure out how can we increase the quality of life where these children do not have to deal with anxiety, agitation, lack of social skills, lack of patience, and get them out of this rigidity. So I want you to consider pride from a biblical perspective. And in a biblical perspective, and the Bible is God-breathed, that is God's word. The Bible is our instruction. As Christians, it's an instruction for life. And in 1 John chapter 2, verse 16, it says, "For all that is in the world, the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the pride of life is not of the Father, but is of the world. And the world is passing away, and the lust of it. But he who does the will of God abides forever." And it becomes increasingly clear to me how these children are calling for us to live a life that is more in harmony with the way that God designed us to live. In accordance with the cycles and rhythms of nature, living modestly from the land, sleeping, and also all the things that we are eating is based on the lust of the eyes and lust of flesh. Many of these processed foods, the gaming that these children are constantly being exposed to, the screen time that we allow them to have because it's so stressful to deal with the symptoms. The pride that we are allowing to consume the ever-increasing amount of children that lands on this spectrum. It's now estimated that 1 in 36 children are on the spectrum will have a diagnosis of autism. That is a lot of children. And what if this pride movement is the ways of the world, which when it's not of the Father, we know that there are only two ways. There's ways of the devil and there's ways of God. And if it's not of the Father, it's of the world. And the kingdom of Satan is what is going on in this world. And so I want to invite you to look at your child's symptoms as warning signals and warning signs about the ways of the world. Indoor artificial lifestyle, artificial foods that we really get drawn to because of the lust of the eyes and the lust of the flesh. And the pride around wanting to fit the world around the symptoms and being prideful of autism has led this whole increasing group of people into an inclusion movement that from the outside does not look good. It looks quite aggressive. It's very linked to the gender confusion or gender ideology movement, however you want to look at it. Many of the children with autism end up in those clinics that end up doing those gender transformation procedures, and I've made another video about that. I'll link to it right here so that you can watch that too if you're watching this on YouTube. So I've made another episode about that, so I really would encourage you to check that, and I'll also link to it in the description for this podcast. So pride of life, lust of the eyes, lust of the flesh is the opposite of the ways that God has designed us. And I believe that those of us who are blessed with a child with autism are blessed with that child because God wants us to draw closer to Him by understanding these children and by loving them the way that He loves them. And that is the acceptance. And we are also guided to look at the body as a temple for the Holy Spirit, and take care of the body and make sure that the body is not defiled. And that goes for via gluttony and via this demonic artificial life that most of us are exposed to in this modern world. So I believe that the spiritual lesson behind autism that we need to be aware of is that these children are wake-up calls for us as moms to draw us closer to God, live a more natural life, not battle against God, battle against biology, or battle against these ways that we are designed to live. So I'll sum it up in the outro so that you know exactly what to do and not to do in Autism Awareness Month. Okay, let's sum it up. What are you supposed to do in Autism Awareness Week, month, day, on Autism Awareness Day, in order for you to use that awareness to take action and change the outcome for your child, making sure that you contribute to the best possible outcome for your child, to as much independence as possible for you and the child, for helping the child develop skills and health and be able to exist in this world. Well, there are some steps in your awareness that needs to be in place that I want to sum up in this outro. First of all, you need to understand what God's plan is for you. Why is He taking me through these dark valleys? It's a good idea to read Psalms to understand how God needs us to be faithful and lean into faith in the most challenging situations. You need to understand how He is sending this child to bring you closer to Him and to point out the ways of the world, because these children are really like antennas. They will flag up and protest against and display symptoms as a response. That's my experience, that's my interpretation, as a response to the artificial wrongdoings of this world, the ways of the world, the ways that are based on vanity, on greed, on pride, on unkindness, on gluttony, on lusts of the eyes, lusts of the flesh. And so the child will bring you closer to God if you look at the symptoms as messages and you change your ways, your nutrition, your lifestyle according to those messages, rather than either coping with the symptoms, being proud of the symptoms, and accepting the symptoms. It's like you don't want to do that if your child's got diabetes and we have similar physiological, biological issues, biochemical issues that can be addressed with a change in lifestyle as well, and a change in nutrition. So we need to give our children that as well on Autism Awareness Day. So what are these things that you need to be aware of? That's almost always the case with these symptoms like agitation, OCD, hyperactivity, aggression, rigidity, eloping, tantrums, lack of social skills, lack of emotional control. There are neurological aspects, of course. There are some aspects that has to do with pyrrole disorder, meaning that they have excess pyrroles, and that has an impact on B6 levels, on zinc levels. There is a component that has to do with copper toxicity. It's linked to depression, it's linked to anxiety, it's linked to aggression, and the child won't be able to tell you, but you need to address copper toxicity. There is almost always an issue with methylation. Most of the time it's undermethylation, meaning that neurotransmitters like serotonin and dopamine, it's not working, it's not getting activated the way that it should. So neurotransmitters, enzymes, hormones, detoxification will be out of whack. And that does impact behavior. So rather than looking at all these biomedical underlying issues that can be addressed through a change in lifestyle and nutritional approaches, rather than looking at these symptoms and saying, I'm proud of these symptoms, I'm accepting these symptoms, society needs to include my child who has these symptoms, why not remove those triggers that's currently decreasing life quality, mood, behavior for your child one by one when you can, by educating you in understanding the bio-individual needs for your child. And that's what I'm really passionate about. If you want to know more about this, I have linked to a couple of videos in the description below, and you can go and watch the video about the autism matrix and about how the pride and acceptance movement can lead to gender confusion and actually horrific choices for your child that your child will make in the future that can really have an impact on their physical and sexual health. So I'll link to those videos here. And you need to educate yourself in those bio-individual and biochemical imbalances. And I'll link in the description to ways that you can connect with me. You can also send me an email, contact@barefootautismwarriors.com, to get into a conversation about how you might be able to help your child through this, or go to my webpage and get started, barefootautismwarriors.com. So these are things that I needed to learn many years ago, and every time it's Autism Awareness Day, it's like this knowledge gets buried even further underground, so that we are now seeing so many cases of autism and so few parents getting the information they need in order to improve life quality and understand the purpose of autism, rather than just accepting it and drown it all in pride. So thank you for watching. If you like this video, I hope you'll subscribe to my channel. I hope you will share this video with someone else, and hit the notification button and bell so that you get notified next time I upload content. See you soon.